New episode of Skeleton Crew just dropped. Where's the crew going to next? Right, sons, everybody, Batuuboii here, and welcome to another review episode for Skeleton Crew. It just dropped yesterday, but I just got done watching it right now. If you haven't been watching the last few episodes, it's a new Star Wars adventure leaning heavily towards pirates. So there's hints of treasure, hints of exploration throughout the galaxy. Like I've been saying the last few episodes, such a breath of fresh air. I feel like every Star Wars show that we've been getting has been heavily focused on the Force and the Jedi, and while you do see those kind of inklings of them in this show, they don't take center stage in this show. This is all about the seedy underbelly of the pirate ring across the galaxy, and it's a lot of fun. We jump into this episode, which is called Can't Say I Remember No Attin, which has been a reoccurring line delivered by SM33. I'm just going to call him Smee just because I want to, and just make it easier for me to know who I'm talking about. But this is a line that he has been repeating every time someone mentions anything about Attin, specifically Fern, or Captain Fern, as she likes to be called. He keeps repeating this line over and over again. And we've mentioned it in previous episodes that his memory is not all there. We're not really sure what has been going on with his memory, but we do learn a lot about it in this episode. So again, if you have not seen it yet, pause this video, come right back, because while this episode does have sort of a separate storyline that it focuses on, when it comes back to the main story, it reveals a lot. So go watch it. When we ended the previous episode, the crew had received coordinates to what we believe to be at Attin, which I was thinking, it might not be it. Like, it's only episode 3. How are they already going to get to Attin? The episode opens up with no soft opening, which I thought was very interesting. It just went from the regular Star Wars title screen and then straight into the Skeleton Crew title card. And we kind of just jump back in, and from what everything looks like, we're back in Attin. Jude Law's character, is like, oh my god, look, there's Attin. The kids see it as Attin. They're flying into Attin, see all the houses and the suburbs that we've seen in Attin. So you even see Wim kind of disappointed as he mentions that things were just starting to get fun on their adventures, but now they've seemingly returned home. They land. This is clearly not Attin. This is some like Walking Dead-esque apocalyptic looking version. We see like dilapidated playgrounds, we see a lot of broken buildings, and you start to get the sense that this really is not at Attin. And I thought it was, and it's actually mentioned in the episode later on, I thought we were getting some like interstellar stuff, that like they traveled across the galaxy and there's some sort of different sense of time where they might have been in a planet for an hour, which then translates to many years on Attin. And Wim even brings it up when they enter a house and they say, maybe we were asleep for 100 years, kind of like that old tale from the Knights. And we cut back to the ship. Jude is digging through the kid's stuff. He finds those Imperial credits that Wim had and proceeds to like pocket them right before Smee picks him up and drives him into a wall, claiming that he's a thief that somehow snuck aboard. Jude explains that it's him, and they begin talking, and Smee brings up a random memory that we didn't think that he had access to in regards to a planet called Attin, which he describes as a very dangerous planet, that there's, these warriors on this planet. This is where we can assume that we are on Attin. Jump back to the kids, and they seem to be caught up in the middle of some sort of civil war going on this planet as they're looking through, and all of a sudden they see blaster fire and are immediately detained by 2 children. We don't get the name of the other child, but the one that we do know is Hannah, who is the older one of these children, and asks, what flag do you fly? And at first it's kind of a confusing question. The kids don't really know how to answer it, but they go off and they start to try to escape as they hear an enemy convoy is coming. And we see this convoy, and it's a lot of humans, and they have these like giant zebra looking animals. They're called AOPs, and they manage to get back to the camp of this tribe, which are called the Troiks, with the enemy encampment being called the Hattins. This whole conflict going on has to do with that the Hattins stole some Aeopes from the Troiks. Star Wars, guys. And this conflict has been going on for some time now. This storyline, while yes, it's very interesting to see, didn't really pique my interest that much. I'd say that this storyline was kind of one of the weaker points of the series for me, which is kind of upsetting because this episode is actually directed by the Daniels, known very well for directing Everything Everywhere All at Once and The Swiss Army Man, which are two of my favorite movies of all time. They're great. So I was really excited to see that they were directing this episode. And there are some hints of their creative direction through this episode, but not very much of it. So this was kind of a letdown for me. But as just continuing through the story, we get to see a lot more of NEEL in this episode, which we love it. We are very proud members of NEEL Nation on this channel. And that's what I'd say is the big highlight of this episode is we truly get to see the kind of person NEEL is and just how selfless he is. There's a scene where he's getting walked through by Hannah through the Troik village and they're going to grab food and he sees these two hungry children and he immediately goes and concerns himself with these children and making sure that they get fed, giving them his meal for them to go and eat something. And he kind of has this conversation with Hannah about why are you fighting? I mean, obviously this planet is looking like a carbon copy of Attin from they can recognize that their home base is their school. They see the homes. Later on, they see the secretary tower that is pretty much identical to the one that they have on Attin. He says, on my planet, we don't really have conflict or fighting. Like there's peace. And I never really understood the meaning of wanting to fight. And he goes on about a story where he fought with his brother about stealing his protractor and that he sprained his trunk, which I did not think was possible. But thank you, NEEL, for that image. But we really get to see it, and it really resonates with Hannah, this idea of peace and harmony between these two tribes, and it sticks with her, and that's the power of NEEL. He's such a great character, such a good addition, and such a just nice just beacon of hope, which resonates throughout all of Star Wars. So moving on, there's kind of this subplot of the other kids training to be warriors by Hannah's father, General Strix, who walks around with a big stick, keeps smacking it, and people, respond. Likewise, that part I wasn't really connecting with at all, but he insists that these kids lead them into their next battle, and obviously these kids are terrified as they're being put right on the front lines. As they're walking through, they're talking about their escape very openly, and one of the soldiers says even talking about abandonment will get you shot. They kind of pressure them into being the first line of defense going into this empty battlefield. And I should go ahead and mention that while all of this was going on, Jod was able to fix Smee's memory capacitor somewhat as they're walking out of the ship to try and find the kids. They get stopped by the Hatton warriors and it immediately just cuts. We don't really know what happens after that. Cut back to this battle. The kids walk forward and NEEL is talking about, that obviously I'm scared, but I know that this is a terrible idea, but we have to do what we can to survive. They're looking out into the fog and being somewhat ready for whatever is going to cross that barrier. And it ends up being Jod and Smee, which is a very nice surprise as they both walk through the fog. The kids are obviously relieved. Contrary to what we might have thought of Jod as being just all about himself, kind of the exact opposite of NEEL, he brings the Aeopes back to the Troiks that were stolen from the Haddons. It seems like everything is all good now. General Strix asks them how they could repay him. They offer them some pelts, and he just says that he wants the kids. He gets the kids. They start to try to make their way back to the ship, but that's when Hannah offers to bring them to the Fallen Sanctum, which was mentioned earlier in the episode as a place with archives that relate to some distant planets, is what they called it. They didn't say specifically that it might have been that big square of planets that we saw in the last episode from Kim when she brought out that Old Republic map. They start making their way towards this tower, which they again say that it resembles the supervisor or the secretary tower from Attin. They get into an elevator and start making their way up, and they see these tablets all around the room with different names on them, which you can go ahead and assume are the other planets surrounding Attin that Kim mentioned. On the map, there are 8 planets, and we get 5 of them. The first one being at Akron, at Arisia, at Aravi, or at Aravi, and at Akoda. So it's nice that we get these names already, but then NEEL finds the one for at Attin, and below each title, there are coordinates for where these planets are. Jot even mentions under the one of at Akron that those are the coordinates that were given to them by Kim in the previous episode. But when they look at the one for at Attin, the coordinates are destroyed. They're scratched off and illegible. And this brings up a memory in Smee's database. He says, yes, I do remember at Attin. And then Fern asks him, oh, so who destroyed these coordinates? And he says, well, I did. When Fern asks him again, he kind of reboots back to his locked memory in saying, can't say I remember, no, at Attin. And they continue to pressure him. Fern uses her new granted powers as the captain to override his memory lock and say, I'm your captain. Literally, I'm the captain now. Override your memory lock and tell me what you know about at Attin. Smee proceeds to go in and talk about how his old captain killed his entire crew in that very room, specifically all that peered on the coordinates for at Attin. He killed all of them, ordered Smee to destroy the coordinates, also gave him an order for anyone meddling in business about at Attin to rip them apart. And this is where we start to kind of get like that crazy kind of camera work that the Daniels are known for, as we get this kind of locked shot of Smee where the camera is kind of following him around as he starts to kind of turn into the Terminator almost. Like his arms extend, he becomes a lot bigger and more threatening. He starts to lunge at the kids, and in comes NEEL, taking the initiative and throwing rocks at him to distract him. Smee starts making his way towards NEEL. NEEL obviously very afraid, but Jod is able to turn the off switch on Smee and he powers down. They start to ask NEEL, oh, are you okay? NEEL faints from exhaustion and fear, and just like that, the episode ends, which I thought was pretty jarring that we got some big reveals in the last like 15 minutes of the episode, but I thought there was going to be a little bit more, but that's all we get for this Tuesday. Again, this wasn't my favorite episode. I do like the stuff that we got pertaining towards the main storyline, which obviously is what I'm here for. This kind of side plot, which you see a lot of in like The Mandalorian, where there's the overarching story, but then we kind of get the story beat of the week. This story beat did not really sit well with me. It didn't really feel like Star Wars to me, but everything else about it, especially developing NEEL's character a lot further, was really great. There's actually one moment that I want to mention that as Hana brings them over to the Forbidden Sanctum, she stops and says, this is the farthest I can go. NEEL persists in wanting her to come with them as they've become very close friends, and he says, there's enough room at my place to go and house you. And she says, that I am going to take over my tribe one day, but I hope that in that I can adopt your notions of peace like you do in your home planet. And it's also here that she comes up, goes to NEEL, and gives NEEL a kiss on the trunk, and props to you, boy. I love NEEL so much. I want him. We need to protect NEEL at all costs. If he dies, this is the worst Star Wars show of all time. But again, I'm really excited to see where the story progresses going into next Tuesday. Let me know what you thought of the episode. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What did you think could have been done differently, or what? I want to hear, did you like this side beat for this week? Because I was not really a fan of it. But again, until next time, just make sure to like and subscribe for more Star Wars content. And for those of you that have been discussing in the comments, thank you so much. I always love getting to discuss these things with you, whether it be something I agree with or not, but that's what it's all about. But until next time, till the spire, my friends.